In a quiet American countryside town, where endless fields of golden wheat swayed with the wind and wooden fences lined the dusty roads, there lived a young girl named Sophia Miller. She was a gentle soul, the kind of daughter whose presence felt like sunlight entering a dim room. Her laughter rang softly like wind chimes stirred by a summer breeze. Her eyes carried a glow that reminded people of humility and kindness, and her smile, calm and tender, had the strange power of washing away the weariness of those around her. Sophia lived in a small farmhouse built of brick and wood. Its roof was patched over the years, its paint faded by seasons of rain and sun, but its walls carried stories of love, struggle, and survival. Inside that modest home lived her parents, Henry and Martha Miller, and her two older brothers, Ethan and Lucas. The house was never filled with riches, yet it always held something greater: the warmth of a family bound by affection. Every morning, Sophia rose before anyone else. The church bell would toll in the distance while the rest of the town still slept. She would wash her face with cold water drawn from the well, light the old stove, knead dough with her slender hands, and prepare coffee whose rich aroma spread through every corner of the house. When Ethan and Lucas eventually stumbled out of bed, it was Sophia who greeted them with kindness, whispering for them to wake up and reminding them that the day was waiting. She was more than a sister. In her presence, she was like a mother, a friend, a source of quiet strength. Henry, who toiled under the sun from dawn to dusk in the fields, often returned with hands blistered and body weary. Yet whenever he saw Sophia waiting with a jug of cool water, kneeling by his side to tend to him, he would forget his exhaustion. Martha often watched her daughter in silence, marveling at how someone so young carried so much grace. The Millers had little, but with Sophia, they felt rich. Evenings in the Miller home were filled with laughter. Ethan shared stories from the town square. Lucas teased his mother until she playfully swatted him with a wooden spoon, and Sophia braided Martha's hair while humming softly. To outsiders, the Millers looked like a picture of simple happiness, an island of peace in a harsh and unforgiving world. But even the purest places cannot remain untouched by storms. One autumn morning, Henry and Martha left home to attend a distant relative's wedding. The roads were slick from the rain the night before, and the sky hung heavy with clouds. Hours later, tragedy struck. Their truck skidded on a curve, rolled violently, and was crushed beyond repair. By the time help arrived, both parents were gone. The news spread through the town like wildfire. Neighbors shook their heads in disbelief, whispering at the square, unable to comprehend the loss. For Sophia, time stopped. When she saw her mother's lifeless body, she collapsed to her knees, pressing her face into her cold skin and crying out for her to return. Her tears soaked her mother's hair, as though her grief alone could bring life back. Ethan and Lucas stood like statues, their faces pale and their eyes hollow. The brothers, once filled with teasing and laughter, became shadows of themselves. From that day, the Miller home lost its music. The walls that once carried joy now echoed with silence and sorrow. Sophia, though devastated, tried to keep the family from crumbling. She cooked, cleaned, and comforted her brothers, reminding them they still had each other and that they must honor their parents' memory. But grief has different faces. For Sophia, it was silent endurance. For Ethan, it turned his heart bitter. For Lucas, it drained his laughter and left behind anger and recklessness. Slowly, the brothers began to change. They no longer came home early. They fell into the company of drifters and drunkards at the edge of town. They staggered through the door late at night, their clothes heavy with the stench of liquor. Sophia would wait by the door, praying in silence, hoping to see them return whole. She begged them to change, but her words carried no weight. One night, Ethan threw his glass across the room, shattering it against the wall. He shouted that her food tasted like dirt. Lucas smirked cruelly, saying perhaps she no longer cooked with love, perhaps her love was elsewhere. Sophia's heart bled at their words. She clasped her hands together and asked why they were treating her this way, what her sin was. Lucas's gaze turned cold. He told her that her sin was breathing, and from now on, every breath she took belonged to them. Ethan seized her arm and warned her that if she disobeyed, her end would be worse than death. That night, Sophia cried into her blanket until her body shook. She prayed desperately, asking God to protect her from the darkness that had entered her home. But the heavens remained silent. It was past midnight when the first nightmare began. The door slammed open. Ethan and Lucas stumbled inside, drunk, their eyes red and burning. The smell of whiskey clung to their skin. Sophia sat up, clutching her blanket. She begged them to stop, her voice trembling. Ethan gripped her wrist, and Lucas covered her mouth. Their eyes no longer held the love of brothers, but the hunger of predators. Her muffled cries filled the room, but no one heard. That night, the innocence of Sophia was destroyed by the very people who should have been her protectors. When the morning came, she lay silent, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. Ethan warned her that if she ever spoke, she would not live to see another sunset. Lucas sneered that no one would ever believe her anyway. What followed was a string of nights filled with horror. Sometimes in her room, sometimes in the damp shed outside where they locked her away, Sophia was beaten and humiliated. The shed smelled of rot and mold, its walls wet from leaking rain, rats scurrying in the corners. There she was left trembling, speaking only to herself in whispers, asking what sin she had committed to deserve such torment. Sometimes she imagined her mother's voice, telling her to endure, reminding her that God's justice would one day come. Her body weakened, her spirit frayed. But somewhere deep inside, a fragile flame of faith flickered. Then came the reckoning. Ethan dreamt one night of a shadow in his room. It told him the count of his sins was complete and justice had arrived. He woke up drenched in sweat, shaken. He told Lucas, but Lucas only laughed, mocking his fear. Days later, while stumbling through town in a drunken haze, Ethan felt something coil around his leg. A black rattlesnake rose from the dust of the road and sank its fangs into his flesh. Poison burned through his veins. He collapsed, writhing, his face twisted in terror as townsfolk watched. Within minutes, he was dead. Lucas drowned his fear in more liquor. He laughed louder at the tavern, drank harder, pretended the curse would never touch him. But one stormy night, as thunder roared and lightning split the sky, the weakened roof of the Miller farmhouse gave way. It crashed down with a deafening roar, burying Lucas beneath the beams. His final scream vanished into the storm. When neighbors entered the property days later, they found Sophia's body curled up in the shed, her hands drawn to her chest, as though shielding herself even in death. Her face was pale but strangely calm, as if she had surrendered her pain to God. She was buried beside her parents, and the entire town mourned her. The story of Sophia Miller became a legend whispered for years. People said the Miller home had once been a piece of heaven, but greed, cruelty, and betrayal turned it into hell. They said God himself had delivered justice to the brothers. Sophia's name lived on as a symbol of innocence wronged, and her tale remained a haunting reminder that no sin goes unseen and that the betrayal of purity carries the heaviest curse.